Hello and welcome to our new campaign, Clothes with a Conscience. Now, ever since I've started working on this campaign, I've been inspired to take a look at my own wardrobe for clothes that I don't wear anymore, the clothes that don't fit, or the ones that I haven't even worn once. But don't we all have clothes like that? From last season's new look to the top we thought we'd fit into, but never did. Clothes are so affordable these days, so I'm going to declutter today and see how much clothing I can get rid of. Wow, that is a huge pile of clothes, and just from one person. Now imagine how many more clothes will come out if every member of my family declutters their closet, and how many more if my entire neighborhood gets rid of the clothing they don't wear. But have you ever wondered where all these unused clothes and all these discarded clothes go to? To the landfills. According to reports, by 2050, India will need a landfill as big as New Delhi. We throw away 1 million tons of textile every year in India. But there is a way to stop the textile waste from choking our environment. Clothes with a conscience. While I go get that done for my pile of clothes, here are our hosts for today's show.
Thanks, Varnika, for that food for thought. Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Jacob.
Namaskar, मैं हूं ताबिश हुसैन.
Did you know that the fashion industry is one of the top 5 polluting industries in the world? The global fashion industry is the second biggest consumer of water. Greenhouse gas emissions by the global textile industry are greater than those from shipping and international air travel combined.
सिर्फ भारत में ही टेक्सटाइल से 10 लाख टन वेस्ट पैदा होता है. वैश्विक स्तर पर बनने वाले कपड़ों में से सिर्फ 10% ही दोबारा इस्तेमाल हो पाते हैं और बाकी लैंडफिल में जो है वेस्ट के तौर पर चला जाता है, जिससे कचरे के ढेर बढ़ते जा रहे हैं और इसका जो असर है वो वातावरण पर पड़ रहा है, जलवायु परिवर्तन पर पड़ रहा है और बड़े स्तर पर पानी का भी कपड़े बनाने में इस्तेमाल होता है.
So, welcome to Clothes with a Conscience, a campaign by Usha and NDTV to encourage and educate people on the need for sustainable fashion and repurposing. Before we move on, let's check back with Varnika to see where she's got with her pile of clothes.
So after decluttering, I brought all my clothes here at Use Me Works. This place is run by Meenakshi Sharma, who's into upcycling old clothes. Let's talk to her. Hi Meenakshi. मैं यहाँ पे बहुत सारे कपड़े लाई हूँ. इसमें से बहुत सारे कपड़े ऐसे जिसमें से टैग भी नहीं उतरा हुआ और कई कपड़े जो मैंने एक बार ही पहने हैं. तो अब आप मुझे बताओ कि अब इन कपड़ों में से क्या बन सकता है.
Okay, that's great, Varnika. I'm so happy that you want to upcycle your old clothes. You'd be surprised to know that there is so much stuff that we can make out of your clothes. There are masks, bags, accessories, dream catchers, decorations, planters basket, and so much more that you can't think of.
So, while Meenakshi assesses more of my clothes, we go back to the studio and by the end of this hour, we'll show you at least one creation come out of this pile of clothes. Let's see what it will be.
तो मीनाक्षी अपनी टीम के साथ हमारे स्टूडियो में ही मौजूद हैं. वो बताएंगी कि कितना आप कुछ बना सकते हैं अपने कपड़ों के साथ, उनको रिसाइकिल कर उनका और बेहतर इस्तेमाल करने के लिए. मीनाक्षी के पास हम चलते रहेंगे इस शो में और देखेंगे कि वो क्या कुछ बनाती हैं इन कपड़ों से. लेकिन उससे पहले अब आगे बढ़िए और आप देखिए कि ये फास्ट फैशन क्या है, जिसको लेकर हम इस शो में बात करेंगे. जो आप कपड़े पहनते हैं, जो फैशन आप देखते हैं, हर रोज़ बदलता है. बदलते वक्त के साथ तेज़ी से फैशन बदल रहा है और बहुत कम वक्त में बदलते ट्रेंड जो हैं वो क्यों फिक्र पैदा कर रहे हैं और क्यों स्लो और सस्टेनेबल फैशन की बात करना यहाँ पर ज़रूरी हो गया है. इस रिपोर्ट में आप देखिए.
You see your favorite celebrity wear something cool or you see a trendy catwalk style you love. You gotta have it. Before you have time to change your mind, someone has mass-produced and released it in a store at a really cheap rate while it's still hot property. But oh god, the next day, something even cooler comes along. Get rid of all of these clothes and get the new ones in fast. Fast fashion can be defined as low-cost, trendy clothing that samples ideas from the celebrity culture. The idea is to get the newest styles in the market as fast as possible so shoppers can buy them while the trend is still popular. Fast fashion plays into the idea that repeating outfits is a fashion faux pas. Sadly, people discard the clothing once it goes out of style, which is very quickly, and all the discarded clothes end up in a landfill. Fast fashion leads to overproduction and consumption, making the fashion industry one of the world's largest contributors to pollution.
So what is the fashion industry as a whole doing about environmental damages of fast fashion? Is it even possible to address issues around fast fashion in a country like India? Joining us now, we have Ashish Chaturvedi, Head of the Environment and Energy and Resilience, UNDP in India, Jaspreet Chandok, a Vice President and Head of Fashion at IMG Reliance, and Reena Dhaka, needs no introduction, fashion designer of India. Ashish Chaturvedi, to you first. We've just seen what fast fashion is. Tell us again what the environmental impact of fast fashion is and why should this concern all of us?
Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, of course, your visuals were quite revealing. You're quite right in pointing out that the statistics are very staggering. And the enormity of the situation can be gauged from the fact that every second, the equivalent of one garbage truck full of clothes is burned or dumped in landfills. Textile dyeing is world's second largest polluter of water. So we are actually talking about these intersecting environmental crises that we are facing of climate change, of biodiversity loss and pollution. And textiles actually contribute to, are a big evil for all of these three problems that we are facing right now. The fashion industry actually produces 10% of all humanity's carbon emissions, and it's the second largest consumer of world's water supply. When you think about the oceans, 35% of the microplastics, these teeny weeny bits of plastics which are entering into our food supply chain, the oceans, about 35% of those microplastics come from the textile industry, especially the laundering of synthetic textiles like polyester. And estimates suggest that if we continue on the current trajectory, business as usual, the carbon budget of the textile industry would jump to 26%. Just imagine it's almost 1/4 would come from the textile industry by 2050. So we're really talking about a very complex, global and multi-tiered industry, which is creating massive number of jobs as well. So it's not only about the negatives. Sure. We really have to think about the possibilities of engaging people in service to the environment as well. Not only thinking, and you have some people sitting in the panel as well, we're going to talk about that. But I think we have to really find the right balance, and business as usual, fast fashion, as it is running right now, can't really continue.
रीना जी, इसी पॉइंट पर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा। आपका एक लंबा तजुर्बा रहा है बतौर डिज़ाइनर और आपने देखा है कैसे ये इंडस्ट्री बदली है इतने वक्त में। लेकिन अभी की अगर आप यहाँ पर ये ज़रूरत देखें, जो स्लो फैशन और सस्टेनेबल फैशन की बात की जा रही है, ये कितना ज़रूरी आपको लगता है? और भारत के अगर हम नज़रिए से देखें तो आपको कितना आसान लगता है ये बात लोगों तक पहुँचा पाना? क्या लोग इसको आसानी से एक्सेप्ट कर पाएंगे?
एक्चुअल में मेरे लिए ये एक टॉपिक है जो मैंने पिछले 10-15 साल से हर इंडियन पॉलिटिशियन जिसको मैंने कभी एनकाउंटर करा है, मैंने उनको रिक्वेस्ट करी है कि ये गाजीपुर में जो ये पहाड़ बन गए हैं कपड़ों के और उसके कारण वहाँ जो स्लज और सुएज और हालात हैं उनकी तरफ हमें एक्ट करना चाहिए। एनीवे, मेरा कोई इफेक्ट नहीं हुआ, पर मेरे लिए ये एक बहुत ही सिग्निफिकेंट जरूरत है इस टाइम की। और इलाज मैं नहीं जानती अकेले में, आई एम श्योर आप लोग will have the expertise and somebody in India, we have so many talented people, we can put a think tank कि उसका हम क्या solution बनाएं जो existing है। और going ahead in future मेरे कारण एक बहुत जरूरी requirement है कि प्लास्टिक जो इसमें हम कपड़े एक्सपोर्ट्स के पैक करते हैं, an exporter gets very tight shipments, फिर वो आगे फैब्रिकेटर को देता है और उसके आगे वो कई बार सब फैब्रिकेटर्स को जाते हैं। सो विच मीन्स द एंड रिजल्ट में वो उसके पास इतना ट्रिकल डाउन कम कैश इन हैंड है कि वो कुछ रिप्लेसमेंट जो है वो बहुत एक्सपेंसिव है, फिर वेट बढ़ जाता है, यानी कि कार्गो का कॉस्ट बढ़ जाएगा, बोथ बायर का या हमारा। सो वन ऑफ द फर्स्ट एसेंशियल्स इज टू फाइंड अ रिप्लेसमेंट टू प्लास्टिक विच इज अफोर्डेबल, which is also price sensitive, right, accessible, and is also accepted with the strong the standards they accept by buyers all over the world, and उसका जो shipping का वजन है वो भी कम हो. दूसरा, जो डिजाइनर्स पैटर्न्स पे चलते हैं, पैटर्न मार्क होते हैं, तो कटिंग में जैसे कोई बनियान बनाओ या कुछ हो, तो उनको वेस्टेज जिसको बोलते हैं, जो जा करके फेंका जाता है, जैसे जो कतरन आप बता रहे थे सर अभी, रोज इतनी वेस्ट होती हैं, वो हम कैसे रीयूज करें उसको, जिसको रद्दी वाले में जाए या झाड़ू में जाता है या कचरे में जाता है, तो वो डिजाइन एक बने. So I feel उससे बहुत बहुत बड़ा फर्क पड़ेगा of using our salvages, our wastages, or to create patterns in a way that even out of the leftover area, a person will make something which becomes a part of the collection. दूसरा, of course, as they are now designers who are making refashion, or it's become a term. Refashion का मतलब वो पुराने कपड़ों को आप फिर से ही फैशन करके पहन सकते हो. And जैसे पुराने जमाने में हमारे पैचवर्क की रजाइयां बनती थी. So don't throw away your clothes. Try to reuse them as craft or as interesting ideas. But the biggest crisis is, in my eyes, is of the salvage from the clothing and the fashion industry, which is going every day as wastage, and how we can use that. And of course, the use of to get a correct, affordable, easily accessible alternative to plastic.
All right. Well, good to have that inside, reality check from what actually happens. Thanks so much. But Jaspreet Chandok, Vice President and Head of Fashion at Rise Worldwide, India isn't just a global hub for manufacturing of fast fashion. We have our own fashion demand that has grown exponentially. Is sustainable fashion, and this leads one to ask, why should one embrace sustainable fashion? Can it also be a sustainable business?
No, absolutely. So, in fact, the work that Rise does in the country is run the Lakme Fashion Week in partnership with the Fashion Design Council of India as well. And we also run a lot of sustainable IPs in the country. So we actually award we have the largest award for sustainable fashion in the country called Circular Design Challenge. So one of the things that we've realized, because we've been working with a lot of stakeholders in India and across the world. So we work with the UNDP, in partnership with them. We work with retailers across the chain. So we'll work with an Aditya Birla Group, a Reliance Industries. And one of the things that we have realized is that organizations are putting in a lot more focus towards sustainable practices. And that's coming through commitments that they are making in media as well. We have a partnership called SURE, which is Sustainable Resolution, where 16 of the largest manufacturers of fast fashion or premium fashion in the country have come together with the Ministry of Textiles and the United Nations to actually make a pledge to become significantly sustainable by 2025. So that is from the producer level. But there is also the consumer level, because the producer can keep producing, but consumer has to also accept all of that. So there is a lot of work that we do in terms of driving consumer narratives around sustainability, that it is cool, it is what is relevant today, it is for the future. So let's say the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, just for your reference, I'm just gonna go down a little, okay, is actually made from PET bottles that we collected at Lakme Fashion Week. We then converted it into fibers, and then we had, which was done by RLN, and then we actually had Satyapal and Rajesh Pratap Singh design a limited edition t-shirt. Out of that, we sent it out to all the influencers and stakeholders in the industry. And, we are actually working towards Fashion Week becoming a carbon neutral event. We'll be the first in the country. All these narratives that we drive makes a significant amount of difference. Then we also have the fiber side of things, because the input into the product, when the producer gets it, also has to be sustainable.
Correct.
So we are actually driving all polyester usage in the country to be recycled polyester through RLN.
Fantastic.
We've actually created a silk substitute, because there is also, let's say animal and, a usage of animal products that we look at with Tencel Lux, which is a global company. So a lot of work is being done in terms of finding sustainable fibers that can then input into the products.
इसको लेकर क्योंकि इस इंडस्ट्री में सबकी अपनी अपनी ज़रूरतें होती हैं। अगर आप देखें कपड़ों को लेकर भी सबके लिए एक साइज़ नहीं होता है। ऐसे में आपको क्या लगता है कि किस लेवल के बदलाव की ज़रूरत है प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस को और ज़्यादा सस्टेनेबल बनाने के लिए, और आपको लगता है कि जो बड़े मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं वो इसमें की रोल प्ले कर सकते हैं जो छोटे लेवल पर जो प्रोड्यूसर्स हैं, मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, उनके मुकाबले?
आई थिंक दोनों साइड को काम करना पड़ेगा, क्योंकि ये दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम दैट एक्सटेंड्स अक्रॉस द इंडस्ट्री। सो हमने जो देखा है कि ओवर द लास्ट 5-7 years, एंड वी वर्क विद ऑल द फैशन डिजाइनर्स इन द कंट्री, कि जो स्मॉल लेवल मैन्युफैक्चरर्स है, ओके, एंड एटलीस्ट एट द प्रीमियम लेवल, a lot of work is being done in terms of creating sustainable practices, both from a people perspective and from a waste management, a dyeing process, using Indian handcraft perspective. On the larger level, though, will be larger environmental impact. So, let's say if you were to look at the 16 manufacturers and brands that signed up with us for sure, okay, their total turnover in the year is 40,000 crores just out of India. So that's 40,000 crores worth of consumption. That if we can move towards sustainable fibers, sustainable, actions and manufacturing processes, that's where the big impact will actually come in. And, I think we also need to keep in mind that sustainability in India is unique. Unlike the world where it is only around the environment, this is also about people and practices and our, hand textiles. And I think there's a lot of work that brings in sustainability through ensuring that जो हमारी textile techniques हैं, जो hand woven है, वो भी continues to grow in the country. So we are in a unique position. I'm actually in London right now. I was having a conversation with the London Fashion Week here, to see how we can create greater narratives. And globally, the biggest conversation right now is towards sustainability and how we can create sustainable linkages in best practices here in the UK and in India. So, a lot of work across the chain, I think, karna padega, or a lot of work is happening, but it is the aggregation that will make the true impact.
Yeah.
तो एक बड़े लेवल पर काम करने की सारा यहाँ पर जरूरत है। आशीष जी, आपके पास मैं यहाँ पर आता हूँ। एक जो बड़े स्तर पर वेस्ट की समस्या है वो भी एक बड़ी चिंता है। यूएनडीपी इंडिया किस तरीके से फैशन इंडस्ट्री और टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री के साथ काम कर रही है सस्टेनेबल रिसोर्सेज प्रोसेस को बढ़ाने की, इसके जरिए इस वेस्ट को या जीरो वेस्ट के टारगेट को अचीव करने के लिए?
हाँ, आई थिंक हमें थोड़ा एक ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव से भी इस चीज को देखना पड़ेगा। द कॉन्टेक्स्ट इज मच ब्रॉडर. It's about lifestyles for environment. I'm assuming some of you would have heard about it. The Prime Minister made this announcement at the COP in Glasgow last year about India's move towards lifestyles or promoting lifestyles for environment. And UNDP is working very closely with the Government of India, with the Niti Aayog and with the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change on promoting this broader narrative of lifestyles for environment, which thinks about sort of promoting sustainable consumption practices. Of course, fashion is one big element of it, but I think we need to have a broader conversation on sustainable lifestyles in general. Specifically on textiles, we're working very closely. So Mr. Chandok already mentioned us. So UN has a broader global sustainable fashion alliance. The UN agencies come together, and because it's such an important industry, it's so relevant for the environment, the climate and biodiversity, the UN agencies formed a global alliance, and we work very closely with businesses all over the world, including in India. But we also work very closely with communities. So I just came back from Ladakh, and we are working there with local artisans who are working on pashmina, but on all other kinds of fibers as well. We are working on nettle fiber in Sikkim. We are working with herders who are trying to do some kind of artisanal work with wool in Uttarakhand as well as in other parts of the country as well.
Right.
And I think we need to take a broader sort of systemic view where we think about lifestyles in general, but we also look at sort of fostering these sustainable practices,
both
because I think the traditional values are really important as well.
Correct. Reena Thakur, talking about global and at the local level, you've been speaking over the years consistently about sustainable fashion, thoughtful fashion being the only way forward as a designer and as a fashion house. But what about consumers? How can consumers be thoughtful about their decisions?
So one of them, as you see, is the simpler ways are refashion. The even easier thing is to rewear your clothes. I also feel not to wash, the clothes so much. because that also pollutes the environment. And even activities, frankly, even ironing, because wrinkle-free, now we have these options, because it's not just that in organic fibers, there is also in the unorganic sector, as Jaspreet ji pointed out, wherein the polyesters are being recycled, because India, as you know, is a large polyester wearing country. And A, it's affordable, and two, it's light, it doesn't crease, so not every man can afford it. But yes, in the upper levels of society, who they become the influencers, for them, A, to go into our own systems. You know, there is so much promotion and talk about khadi, because frankly, what it does is khadi consumes less water. It is a bit coarser. It does have discrepancies. It may not go into a perfect white, but it is a fabric which is completely organic. It's sustainable. So there is a lot of, let's say, propaganda, a desire from designers, from the government, from the back end, to come out and start using indigenous fabrics like khadi, like we did in the past. And of course, to recycle, to rewear, to give away, to whatever, patchwork. It's the best trend, I feel, in the world, because right now it is trending. But of course, designers are innovative. They're weaving the patches. They're also creating prints out of it. But ideally, patchwork is the best way to recycle your leftover side wings and the clothing. We can use it as bags, as accessories, like maybe the designer who you have given the mission or the task to will come up with. But going forward, I think sustainable in clothing, we need to make simple step changes. I just think just rewear your clothes. You don't have to hoard so much. You can recycle, rearrange the trends or refashion it, and be conscious of what you're buying now. You know, look at the tags, because where do they come from?
Thank you all for joining us, for all of your work in this field over the years, over the decades, but also helping us create some awareness today. We really appreciate your time. So bigger fashion houses, brands and designers, they're working on green strategies. But how do we get this down to the level of street fashion? In a country like India, what is the potential for slow, sustainable fashion, and can we find solutions that are better for people and the planet? We have Priyanka Khanna, Head of International Expansion at Fashion for Good, joining us. We have Mayura Davda Shah, Founder and Creative Director at Mayu, and we have Professor Dr. Binaya Bhushan Jaina of NIFT, Bhubaneswar. She's also the Chairman of the Textile Association of India, the Odisha unit. Priyanka Khanna, to you first. Tell us about Fashion for Good, and what is it, what does it do, and what has your experience been like engaging with Indian brands?
Thank you. Fashion for Good basically is a global platform. The purpose of Fashion for Good is to scale technology innovation in the fashion industry to make the fashion industry more sustainable. The broader level goal being bring the industry from these traditional methods to more modern advanced methods and reduce the overall carbon emissions that the industry creates. We are a 5-year-old initiative. We are based out of the Netherlands, but it's a global initiative working with the industry across the board. And we spent the last 3 years in Asia. In 3 years, I think particularly based out of India, we've engaged with almost all of the Indian industry, talking about manufacturers, brands, and technology innovation. And I think it's quite fantastic to see that India is this absolutely amazing market, which is uniquely positioned. It's not just a production market. It does have over 15,000 manufacturers producing for brands across the world, but it's also producing for domestic consumption. It's a huge consumption market with 1.3 plus billion people who are now starting to get, even with the growth happening, they're starting to become bigger and bigger consumers for the world in general. So India seems to be sitting in this amazing point where it has the opportunity to adopt very quickly and change very quickly into more sustainable practices, and then become a circular sourcing or a more sustainable sourcing region for the world, because it is a very important market for the world, production market, but also educate and start changing and building newer practices within the country. So our experience in general with the industry, I think there is a lot more advancement that you see with the bigger brands, as you said in your session also. But when you talk about Indian industry, I think it is still learning. It's still at a nascent stage to understand what sustainability means, what carbon emissions are. We see very, very pioneering brands and manufacturers who are actually taking huge commitments and making big opportunities, or let's say changes in the supply chain at the moment. But
इसी की हम यहाँ पर बात कर रहे हैं मैम कि कैसे इंडिया में, इंडियन मार्केट में इसको लेकर चैलेंजेस हैं और क्या यहाँ की ज़रूरत है। यहाँ पर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा मयूरा। हम बात कर रहे हैं कैसे ज़्यादा सस्टेनेबल बनाया जा सकता है फैशन को, और आपका जो ब्रांड है वो सस्टेनेबल लग्जरी के लिए जाना जाता है। किस तरीके के मटेरियल आप इस्तेमाल करते हैं उसके बारे में बताइए, और क्या ज़रूरत है आप समझते हैं इसके लिए।
Sure, thank you so much. मायू जो हमारा ब्रांड है वो इसी प्रेमिस पे बनाया गया है कि we offer fashion, premium fashion, luxury fashion, but in a very sustainable manner, as sustainable as we can make it with the use of innovative alternative materials. जैसे कि हमने शुरुआत की fish leather से, हालांकि ये एनिमल ओरिजिन से आता है, फिश से बनाया जाता है। दिस इज एक्चुअली अ बाय प्रोडक्ट ऑफ द फिश प्रोसेसिंग इंडस्ट्री, एंड अगर आप इसका प्रोसेस देखेंगे राइट फ्रॉम द सोर्स टिल द एंड, ये रिलेटिवली काफी ज्यादा सस्टेनेबल है अगर आप इसका इम्पैक्ट देखोगे एनवायरनमेंट पे। तो हमने शुरुआत की फिश लेदर से, जैसे दिस इज साल्मन लेदर, दिस इज वन ऑफ आवर प्रोडक्ट्स, एंड दिस इज वुल फिश लेदर। ये हम आइसलैंड और जर्मनी से इंपोर्ट करते हैं। एंड उसके बाद हमने शुरू किया वीगन फैशन की तरफ देखना वेरी सीरियसली। सो देन वी स्टार्टेड विथ पिनियाटेक्स, जो कि पाइनएप्पल के पौधे से, एज एन उनके पत्तों से जो फाइबर्स एक्सट्रैक्ट होते हैं उनसे बनाया जाता है। सो दिस इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ द मटेरियल। एंड अभी हम देख रहे हैं to go more and more into vegan materials, जो कि सारे plant based होंगे। And an exciting update that I'm happy to share today is that we're also looking at developing our own material made out of a fruit byproduct, which is widely available in India, in our country.
All right, we have Chirag Tekchandani, co-founder and CEO of the Bombay Hemp Company, joining us. Thanks, Chirag. Good to have you on our show. Also, you know, we started off by asking how is it possible to address fast fashion issues in a country like India? But let me turn that question around and ask it to you in a different way. What about in a country like India? Does that also not mean equally that we have a potential for slow, sustainable fashion given our size?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on the show as well, and pleasure to be amongst a bunch of distinguished individuals that are trying to work in this space and make a difference. At our end, actually, we are known as Bombay Hemp Company. Bombay Hemp Company is a perspective that is different, and we've started Bohiko with a solution-based approach in the sustainable textile space. We are in India's first industrial hemp and medicinal cannabis company. Hemp is also colloquially known as bhang in our country, Audyogik bhang. And we, around 10 years ago, started Bohiko with a mission to educate, cultivate, and elevate India about the uses and benefits of hemp as a crop. So for everyone here and listening, hemp actually dates back to about the use of hemp dates back to early centuries. We had the Royal Navy, Cleopatra, all of them actually draped themselves in hemp, which is a fiber that is much stronger than when compared to cotton. It's also, from an agricultural lens, it is the end that Bombay Hemp Company is working towards. The means of which is hemp, because the farmers in our country can actually benefit of growing this crop as well. So at a consumer end, it is not only a strong fiber that can last you much longer, but it is also it also cuts UV rays to about 98% as compared to cotton, which does it to about 92. It also is something that wears much better. So it's a little like wine. It ages much better. And you know, when the more you wear it, the softer it gets. So it washes pretty well. And over and above that, it also brings about benefit to the stakeholders involved in the community, right? Like, for example, our very farmers, the India is an agrarian economy, and for the farmers here, they need alternative crops to grow, which they can benefit from. So a large part of India can actually grow Audyogik bhang in it only takes about 100 days to grow. It grows 12 feet tall. So here what I'm trying to say is that sustainable fashion is also about trying to look at it from a different perspective. Do your bit in the country to try and see how you can mitigate the crisis that we are speaking about on this, and bring about systemic change across the value chain, which is not only at a farmer level, but also for the end consumer. You start consuming much lesser as a consumer, right? So you
तो हर जगह पर थोड़े चेंजेस की बदलाव की जरूरत है यहाँ पर, लेकिन आपने फार्म की यहाँ पर बात करी, तो फार्म टू फैशन कॉन्सेप्ट की अब बात करते हैं। प्रोफेसर बुनाया, मैं आपके पास आना चाहूंगा यहाँ पर। ये कॉन्सेप्ट जो है ये आपने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था निफ्ट भुवनेश्वर में, जिसके बाद और जगह भी इसको रेप्लिकेट किया गया। इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा आप बताइए हमारे दर्शकों को।
जी धन्यवाद। देखिए, फार्म टू फैशन कॉन्सेप्ट जो है इसे बेसिकली रिवोल्यूशनरी एंड इंक्लूसिव कॉन्सेप्ट था, जिसको हमने हैंडलूम के ऊपर अप्लाई करने की कोशिश किया। दिस इज द फर्स्ट एवर इंस्टीट्यूशन इन दिस कंट्री एंड प्रोबेबली इन द वर्ल्ड where we have tried to integrate the entire eco-friendly fashion value chain, right from farm to fashion. What we have done, because we know in handloom, we never apply any synthetic fiber. We always apply natural fiber. And until we discovered the synthetic dyes, we used to apply natural dyes sourced from different plant or mineral sources. So we went around different parts of the country and found almost more than 200 varieties of natural dye yielding plants. In Odisha itself, we have got more than 100 different varieties of natural dye yielding plants itself. So we got about 10 different natural fiber yielding plants and about 60 different natural dye yielding plants in our campus, just to show the students that how you can integrate this into the handloom fashion value chain.
Wonderful. Professor, so that shows how you're tackling the problem at the source, right? Making sure you're not putting in clean dyes, etc. But what about the end? Because our clothes can take as long as 200 years to decompose. You, Professor, are also the chairman of the Odisha unit of the Textile Association of India. What can such bodies do, perhaps doing already, to produce less waste, to reuse it, to basically keep it out of landfills in the end?
Yes, it's a very interesting question. In fact, we have to keep ourselves away as much as possible from the synthetic fibers. You see, today almost more than 65% of all the fibers are from the petrochemical base. And this is the main cause of the blame for this fashion industry, polluting the environment in terms of GHG emissions or microplastic pollutions or even the water use. So when we have got a wonderful agroclimatic zones, why can't we produce different types of bast as well as leaf fibers, which can be used in the industry? And India produces almost more than 95% of all handloom produced in the world. We can at least, apply those in the handloom industry to bridge the gap between demand for and supply of sustainable fashion. We are trying to educate as an industry body to the, to go for both responsible production and consumption, trying to educate how they can bring in sustainability in the industrial practices by using different types of natural fibers, whether it is jute, hemp, or it's linen, or it's about kenaf or seashell or any other fiber.
And how do we magnify this? How do we take this to the mainstream? Priyanka Khanna, we asked this question a little while earlier. You have bigger fashion houses, brands, younger designers, they're all working on green strategies. But how do we get this down to the level of street fashion?
I think that's an excellent question, because innovation always ends up happening at the larger scale level, or let's say the big brand and manufacturer level. I don't know if there is a clear-cut answer that I have for you here, but there are 3-4 key aspects that matter at the street level. I think one is to reach the common ground, or let's say every little retailer. A huge role needs to come around the policy side. So policy makers need to get involved. And India has some great examples of what has happened in the past. Wastewater in the past in this industry has been a huge issue. And governments have come together, put policies in various regions to reduce this, and that has been applied for all the street level players, so all the smaller manufacturers to bigger manufacturers. And I think similar initiatives now need to come around newer materials, dyeing processes, all the other technology intervention that has been discussed here. So much more incentives for Boheco, for example, for building newer materials, or fish leather, for example, that role still needs to play by government, which we see happening a lot more at EU level, but not so much yet at India level, including textile waste, which I think is such a massive problem. And there is policy around the imported part, but there isn't much policy around domestic and pre-consumer waste as such. The second key aspect is, I believe, consumers. While consumers, I think, feel like they don't play a role enough, but consumers play a huge role. Yeah. If consumer is educated, they're able to ask questions, as mentioned in the previous channel, to understand where their clothes are coming from, who's making their clothes, what are the different aspects that they need to understand, and maybe further educate or push the industry to change. And
we're trying to do our little bit by doing shows like this. But Chirag, you know, I loved hearing everything you said about hemp, and I really want to try and pick up something. I've never tried it, so I'd love to see what it feels like. But let me ask you this one question. Even natural fabrics can be a problem, right, at the scale fast fashion demands, because cotton, we're told, requires enormous quantities of water, pesticides in developing countries. Then this leads to droughts and other sorts of problems. I mean, how do you, I mean, it can't just be this or that. Sometimes even natural products can consume a lot of resources.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. But there are solutions that are available in this country if looked at well, right? So, for example, can't help but take it again. One can actually grow this crop, which is known as bhang, or has a very maligned sort of perspective when it comes to the end consumer. But as far as the farmers are concerned, this is a crop that can grow in alteration, or there's a lot of crop rotation that takes place in this country as well. In fact, it refertiles the soil. So for the benefit of the farmer, if he or she wants to grow twice a year, natural resources are available for them to take to, and in alteration with their steady and mainstay crops, actually grow things. Because right now it's all wild and feral that's growing in this country, right? Where the heartland of cannabis or hemp, it was all first found here in the Himalayas, and now the globe has made a billion-dollar industry out of it. So point being that we have available solutions within the country's heartland itself, and we should try and take to those, because one thing is for sure, that once we scale any natural commodity, that's when it becomes affordable for the end consumer to take to as well. Sustainable and slow fashion are generally fabrics and apparel that priced at much dearer than the conventional fast fashion. But hey, what if you were told that for every one sustainable garment that you purchase and make your decision much more responsible towards the climate, you will not you will have to not purchase all those 4, 5 8 wash lasting fast fashion clothes that you typically pick up from retail. So I think it's right there. It's just that we all have to try and do our bit, and it's not asking for much, right? To just try to go with 10% of your wardrobe being sustainable, and that's a little attempt that all of us here can make.
Start somewhere.
मयूरा, इसी पॉइंट पर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा। अब इतनी सारी हमने चीज़ें देखी कि हमारे पास क्या क्या ऑप्शंस हैं, किस तरीके से हम और अपने कपड़ों को, अपने वार्डरोब को बेहतर बना सकते हैं। आप क्या सलाह देंगे डे टू डे लाइफ में अपने वार्डरोब को और ज़्यादा सस्टेनेबल बनाने के लिए क्या करना चाहिए लोगों को?
Yeah, I think to Priyanka's point, I think I'd like to say that it all starts with being mindful as a consumer, being more aware. It starts with educating yourself, asking the right questions, doing your research. I think that's the first step towards adopting a sustainable lifestyle or having a sustainable wardrobe. I think one of the things that also matters there is putting quality over quantity, right? We're all attracted by the trends, ever-changing trends in the fashion space. But I think a lot is happening in the sustainable fashion scene as well. A lot of brands are offering, such as, what we do, one of the things that we do is we embrace a seasonless fashion. So we're offering products and designs that would be evergreen and can go from generation to generation. I think speaking to that effect, if you can try to say no to fast fashion, a little bit at a time, and also if budget is your concern, then I think a lot of interesting startups and brands are coming up that are offering pre-loved fashion. Also, when it comes to occasional wear, right? You can, when it comes to women, we only want to wear our lehenga once, or, wear it, as less as possible. So then I think there's also this option of rentals these days, which is quite interesting, right? It has been adopted widely in the US, but we're also seeing that being offered in India now, which is encouraging.
Yes,
so I think...
and we'll have some of them joining on our show in a bit.
थैंक यू सो मच आप सब लोगों का जुड़ने के लिए हमारे साथ प्रियंका, चिराग, मयूरा और प्रोफेसर विनया। यहाँ पर सर एक छोटे से ब्रेक के लिए रुकेंगे, उसके बाद हम और ज़्यादा चैलेंजेस और क्या कुछ किया जा सकता है इसके बारे में बात करेंगे। लेकिन उससे पहले मीनाक्षी के पास लेकर चलते हैं आपको, जो कि कुछ बनाने की कोशिश कर रही हैं। क्या कुछ वो बना रही हैं उसकी एक झलक आप देखिए, उसके बाद के बाद आपका स्वागत है। अब तक आपने देखा फास्ट फैशन को लेकर हमने चर्चा की हमारे खास मेहमानों के साथ। अब बात करते हैं कि और क्या कुछ किया जा सकता है इस दिशा में। हमारे साथ और जो मेहमान जोड़े हैं उनसे आपका तारुफ कराते हैं। श्रुति सिंह हैं, कंट्री हेड इंडिया फैशन रेवोल्यूशन। सहर मंसूर हैं, एनवायरमेंटल एंटरप्रेन्योर, फाउंडर ऑफ बेयर नेसेसिटीज। और नैन्सी भसीन हैं, फाउंडर दिस फॉर डेथ। नैन्सी, सबसे पहले यहाँ पर मैं आपके पास आना चाहूँगा। हमने देखा कि आपकी श्रुति, सबसे पहले मैं आपके पास यहाँ पर आना चाहूँगा। हमने देखा कि क्या ज़रूरी है इस वक्त फास्ट फैशन को टैकल करने के लिए, या इसको देखते हुए, और आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो है वो भी कैंपेन करती है क्लीन, सेफ, फेयर और ट्रांसपेरेंट अकाउंटेबल फैशन इंडस्ट्री के लिए, जो कि बहुत ज़रूरी भी है। ऐसे में आपका इंगेजमेंट कैसा रहा इंडियन इंडस्ट्री और कंज्यूमर्स के साथ?
This for that ka response has been very, very encouraging, and I think it's a very sad notion that this revolution is waiting to happen. It's already happened. The second-hand buying and selling industry is actually growing 3.2 times traditional retail, and over the next decade, this is where the maximum growth in the fashion industry is going to come from. And in India also, this concept of pre-loved or sharing your closet with each other is not new. It's something that we've done with our mothers, with our sisters, in close groups, with our friends forever, And the This For That platform just lets you kind of access so many more closets pan-India and connect with like-minded women and do this. So the response to This For That, quite honestly, has been very, very warming, and there's definitely hope that people want to take up secondhand and want to make more conscious choices. And the proof is that this is not coming just from people who are more conscious and based out of metros, but also in smaller cities where people need access to brands, and a platform like This For That is giving them that access at a very, very reasonable price. So it's a sweet deal. It's great for the environment, and therefore the response has been very, very encouraging.
श्रुति, इसको लेकर आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे? ये सवाल आपसे भी अगर मैं पूछूं तो।
I think in India, everyone is getting a bit more conscious about, just like they are about food, that what food are we eating? Where does this food come from? We are getting conscious about fashion, which means what is going on in our clothes, what are the materials that they are made out of. does it have plastics in it? Because 60% of our clothes are actually made out of synthetic fibers, and synthetic fibers means it has plastic in it. Yeah. So what are they made out of? Why am I buying clothes? So do I really need to go and buy a new clothes, or just like my co-panelist said that can I buy from a thrift store? Can I swap my clothes? So there are a lot of ways that people are getting very aware about the different mediums where they can express their fashion, because we love fashion and we want that fashion to be good for the planet and for the people. And the third thing is who's making my clothes? So are the clothes made by people who are paid well? Are they living in good living conditions? Are they, artisans? And are we, when we buy clothes or when we are swapping clothes, are we promoting and supporting our local artisans, our traditions? So people are getting conscious about it, and they are exercising that choice. And we have seen time and again this movement to be growing, and this is no longer a niche that we can say that there is fashion and then there is a subset of it which is sustainable fashion. We have to this is the future.
Yeah.
सहर, यहाँ पर मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगा, हमने वेस्ट को लेकर बात की, एक बड़े लेवल पर जो है इंडस्ट्री से वेस्ट पैदा होता है, जो एक बड़ी चिंता की भी बात है। आप जीरो वेस्ट लाइफस्टाइल को फॉलो करते हैं, इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा बताइए हमारे दर्शकों को।
Yeah, definitely. I think, we communicate so much of who we are through our clothing, and it's so important to make that decision a mindful and a sustainable choice. I mean, just the business of creating fashion creates 1.2 billion tons of greenhouse emissions globally. And, I think over time, if we just look about how fashion used to be and how it is now, just going back to our Nani's time, our Ajis and Tatis, they all knew the name of the local tailor that they were going to, Masood Bhai perhaps, right? They knew how much they were getting paid for it. And the truth is basically over time, as the distance between where our clothes have been produced and where they're being purchased has increased, the transparency is also reduced, right? And also the carbon footprints has quadrupled in many cases. Yeah. If you think about it, we used to have maybe 2 seasons, summer clothing and winter clothing perhaps. And now we have about 400 new styles being introduced almost every week in some of the fast fashion brands. And for me personally, zero waste living brings in the element of trying to have a very solution oriented and, action oriented decision towards the way I build my sustainable or low impact closet. And I think, rather than making people feel guilty about their clothing choices, it's an invitation for people to join the movement, right? And I think whether that means through swapping, through repairing, buying more ethical, mindful brands, but also celebrating India, because we're so lucky. Each state has its own form of arts, right? Whether that's bandhani, ikat, block print. Literally every state celebrates a form of art through clothing and textiles.
I like what you said. I like what you said about how not making people feel guilty or shame them into making their decisions. So, if Nancy, let me just ask you, we're winding up now. So, what advice? I'm guessing we want to walk the talk, right? What advice would we give to any consumers? How can we make those small changes in our own lives, in our consumption patterns?
Yeah, I think the first thing that most of us have not been doing and can start off with is actually conducting a wardrobe audit, right? So every 6 months, assess your wardrobe, look at the things that you haven't worn or used at all, or have used very, very less and not reached out for in the last 6 months, and segregate them in piles. So one could be the swapping or thrifting pile, where you think that things are still in great condition and they can be reused and reworn and passed on to other people. And just for everyone's information, merely by extending the life of a garment by 3 months, you end up cutting the carbon footprint by 5 to 10%, right? And then there could be one pile where you think that the clothes are not usable at all, and those can be upcycled or recycled in some way. Meenakshi is a great example of, on your show, she was just showcasing what can be done through these things. And then, of course, there has to be a pile which sparks joy and kind of lets you feel good about the way your wardrobe looks and the way you look. And that sort of becomes the go-to pile that you retain, right? And then very consciously, slowly, as you declutter, the first bit is always decluttering and minimizing. And once you've got yourself down to that point, then start off taking in pieces very mindfully. right?
And people are
consider
doing
what you
that
use
more
long.
because we had this natural, injunction point with the pandemic, and we all were at home just wearing pajamas and surviving perfectly fine for 2 years.
Absolutely.
But Shruti, quickly similarly, what advice would you give or what tips do you have? Just two points.
Got it. So I think you can just love your clothes, So when you're buying mindfully, when you're buying conscious clothes, you love your clothes, take care of them really well. I do want to add that it's important to understand also the wash care. So not just where we are buying from or who we are buying from, but also how we are taking care of the clothes, mend them if need be. Visible mending is becoming such a big movement where people are using embroidery and other techniques to give the garment a second life. So it's really important to understand that those are great mediums to express your fashion.
बिल्कुल बहुत अच्छा आपने यहाँ पर जो है चीज़ें समझाई हमारे दर्शकों को। बहुत शुक्रिया आपका श्रुति और सहर और नैन्सी हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए। तो सर यहाँ पर चलते चलते जहाँ से हमने शुरुआत की थी वहाँ पर चलते हैं और देखते हैं कि मीनाक्षी जो हमारे स्टूडियो में कुछ बनाने की कोशिश कर रही थी वो कहाँ तक पहुँची।
Yeah. So using all of that, अभी हम लोग ने there's this neck piece out of the t-shirt. There's a dream catcher. Priyanka,
Wow.
show the apron. So she's wearing the apron we created out of dress, and she has a phone charging hanger.
Oh wow!
Yeah, this is a very useful thing while you're traveling. Also, there's a lot of plugs are far off and the phone is hanging. So this is something handy. And there is a bag, since the plastics are banned. Everybody has t-shirts, and anybody can make a t-shirt bag. It doesn't take more than 2 minutes. You can make them plenty and keep using them and kick the plastic away. And yeah.
That's a great note to end on. Fast fashion has a lot to answer for. Thank you all for joining us on this show to create more awareness, to get our voices and really push for change and say no to fast fashion.